I'm always interested when a game tries something slightly different with a tried and tested genre or a way of doing things, and Cats and the Other Lives is definitely an example of that. It's a game that's very similar to a visual novel or perhaps a walking simulator game where it's all about the story taking place in front of your eyes. But what it's doing is instead of you controlling or being part of a conversation or having an inner monologue as you're walking around somewhere, you play as Aspen the cat. And what you're doing is meandering in and out of other people's conversations that are going on around you, piecing together the story as you go, having some troublesome mini games along the way, and trying to kill a mouse. You got to have your dinner. This game takes a little bit of time to get itself going because there's a lot of characters to be set up and a lot of backstory to kind of paint the atmospheric picture of how this game's going to play out. You are Aspen the cat as part of the Mason family inside of this ginormous mansion that is decrepit and falling apart. Your, patriarchal person, Bernard, has died. Not necessarily in mysterious circumstances initially, but everyone in the family is attending his funeral, and this brings in a variety of characters, some more hipster, some quite old and stuffy, some remind me of Brie Vanderkamp from Desperate Housewives is basically Shannon, and the way how she tries to keep everything prim and proper with her children. And you as Aspen the cat wanders around trying to weave in and out of different conversations as they go. The characters will move around the house and you're kind of incentivized to follow them around because if doors are shut you can't get into those rooms, and so as they kind of burst in and have conversations you kind of sneak in through the open doors as you go. But Aspen the cat has its own magical story going on in the background. You move Aspen around with your mouse and you can kind of point on different objects and they'll have different things. So it might be drinking some water or sleeping in a chair, or it might be scratching in certain places. But you can also hide underneath furniture. You can also meow at certain times. And there's also a dark mode where when all of the lights go out or if it's dark at night, you can see through cat eye vision, which is quite cool. You can also hear and sense and smell objects, which you can then follow traces around to try and wrap up pieces of the story. So you might find something that's like a critical object, and when you sniff it, you can then go off and follow the trail to then pick up the next part of the story. A lot of this sounds like potential detective work, but Cats and the Other Lives does it in a way that's very, very narrow. So you can't really escape off of the story's path too much for very long. And so whilst there are kind of detective aspects to this game, you are very much clicking and moving from left and right, A to B, or following characters around as they talk to each other so that you are taken on a narrative adventure across the 6 or so hours that this game takes to complete. Once that first hour of setup is over, the game then evolves into a really well-paced mystery, but you have to have that initial buy-in and slog to set up all of these main characters and their tensions and hates and dislikes of each other, because this Mason family, like a traditional well-off family, are all backstabbers and they've all got their own vested interests, and there's a bit of slice of life drama going on, but there is this overarching mystery that unfolds beautifully. And I've not put any footage in beyond chapter 1 for this review because I don't want to spoil it for people. There are a couple of issues with this game, though, that I would be remiss for talking about because it actually has prevented me reviewing this game earlier. The first one is that whenever I start up this game, there's a introduction screen which just freezes and lags for the very first time I'd done it, 12 minutes. After that, it's now reduced down to about 5 to 7 minutes, but I thought that the game had actually broken, and I kept on Control-Alt-deleting and closing and exiting out, to the point where I was then going around going, well, this game's just broken, I can't review it, help. So that was a bit of a problem, and it's caused delays in me being able to review it, because I just parked the game and thought, needs a day 10 patch. However, there is a Steam thread forum talking all about it, and quite a few people having this issue, so I'm not quite sure why. I've never experienced quite such a lengthy lag in a game like this before, especially for something that feels like it's not going to absolutely smash the performance of a PC, and my PC is very high end. It shouldn't be like that, and it does need resolving. The second issue is much more around controls, and this is because we have completely mouse-based controls where you're having to point and press and hold so that Aspen then runs to certain locations or keeps running forward as like the corridor appears in front of you. And this makes some of the mini games where you're chasing a mouse or you're trying to get around a tree, for example, and there's one right the way towards the end which are problematic. They just don't work very well with the control scheme that's set out in front of you. And there are additional like hints or controls that kind of get unlocked that can help, but the game never explains any of that. And so you're left getting very frustrated trying to do something that never happens, and so you then have to constantly go around and re-loop and retry a puzzle again and again and again and again, and I found it really infuriating. It's down to the control scheme and the lack of finesse around it, which works nicely in the general game because you can just kind of click vaguely and Aspen will kind of wander over to where you need them to be. But when it comes to precision controls in a minigame, it fails miserably, and so you will have a bit of frustration getting through that. So, I've been a bit harsh for the last 2 minutes on Cats and the Other Lives, but there is an engrossing mystery here if you give it time and you're happy to kind of persevere beyond these minigame issues and the ridiculous startup problems that it has. There's some great music that pops up in occasion. I would also warn against people who are slow to read because the text is going at pace as people walk around the house. And so only for key scenes do you get to actually stop and like actively push through the text. So if you struggle with accessibility for reading, this is not going to be a game for you. However, on the flip side, it does feel much more like you are part of natural flowing conversations in real time, trying to run around as a cat, getting the best of all of the different information. So, swings and roundabouts. I don't think there's necessarily a quote-unquote right way of going about doing this. It's a design decision, and one that certainly makes Cats in the Other Lives stand out. Written review will be over on higherplayinggames.com, and I apologise for my croaky, manky voice. I've had a terrible cold for the last 2 weeks. This is the best I've sounded in a fortnight, so I'm trying to get some videos out because I'd run out of content to keep going through. So hopefully that wasn't too terrible. Take care.
Higher Plane Games is part of the Higher Plane Network, a completely independent media outlet supported by people like you. The goal is to create the best possible content that cultivates a richer indie scene for games as well as music and entertainment. To find out more and to get involved, visit patreon.com/Higher Network. Your support makes all the difference, and in return you'll gain access to bonus content and downloads. Thank you for watching.